Hello guys, UnoPro here, back for another video, and I know I say this a lot, but today I am especially excited because today I am casting a best of 5 between Meziljie and Grinch, who were kind enough to offer to play some games so I could do this video and get some more casting experience, because it is something I have said that I'm looking to get into, organising some potential casting for tournaments, all that kind of thing. We don't have an official spectator mode in Duelist at the moment, but I have been using OBS, playing around, trying to make it at least semi-decent and allow us to see both the hands, so hopefully that will be it. There may be a little bit of transition times as we get the game synced up, but hopefully it should run pretty smoothly. So we are playing the Conquest format, which means that the deck that wins is out. So you need to get one win with each of your decks. Now we can have a look at the lineups and see Meziljie brought Argian, very strong, very stable meta pick. Varth and Xerix. The only one that's a little bit surprising there is Varth. Xerix is also very, very strong due to that really strong Bloodborne spell. Varth probably a control list. Starhorn does seem to be the pick for aggro list just because of that drawing card ability, but we never know for sure with Magma. Grinch is definitely experimenting. We can see he's got 3 alternate of the new generals, which are definitely a bit less popular. Now you do have to keep in mind that these players are experimenting. This is not an official tournament game. Obviously they're still trying their best, and there'll definitely be high quality gameplay, but there's maybe a few things that they're tinkering with, trying out. So we can see the Cassiva definitely going to be a more controlling style deck. The Reaver and the Sarge. Now I don't think Sarge is ever going to be the best choice. The Bloodborne spell is definitely just a bit too weak, but Grinch is experimenting. He likes to play all the decks. It will be interesting to see if Sarge can do some work. So we will see with that as we keep that in mind. We will get into our... Now we can see Meziljie has started with Varth and Grinch with the Reaver. Let's get the games started. Alright, so we can see the opening hand. No good plays for Meziljie. Definitely a very late game hand. And we can see that Grinch is actually playing an Arcanist deck. So straight off the bat he's going to be using that Prismatic Illusionist to summon a 3/2/1, cycle a card, and not a lot of ranged removal for Magma. This is very, very hard to deal with, and already the game is looking in a pretty terrible spot. As we can see, Meziljie misses on a turn 3 play as well, and Grinch is looking just to snowball this one out as fast as possible. Now he can cast a Mist Dragon Seal with another Prismatic Illusionist, create 2 more 2/1s, which is looking really, really strong. And basically Magma is going to be constantly looking for an answer now. Now we will see if he'll make that play. Instead he chooses to develop both 2/3s, which I think is very strong. Magma can't really deal with this too well unless he has Flash Mercantor, which would still leave a active Lantern Fox going. So I think this play is very fine. Develop those threats, and make sure you're using your cards, because if he wastes all his cards, just wasting a Mist Dragon Seal for not a lot of value, if Meziljie is able to come back on the board, say with Plasma Storm or maybe a Mercantor, then suddenly he's up on card advantage. This way, Grinch isn't wasting his cards. As he draws the 3rd Prismatic Illusionist, things are going to start getting a bit ridiculous. As we can see, just generating an insane amount of 2/1s, snowballing the game out of control. And we don't know for sure that Meziljie is running Plasma Storm. I imagine he might be running 1 or 2, but he definitely needs it at this point. There's basically no other way. And as we can see, an insane amount of 2/1s coming in. Will be interesting to see how aggressive Grinch goes with his 2/3s. He doesn't want to get them Mercantored. So as you can see, only 1 can be Mercantored at a time, which is perfectly fine. And 2 is more than enough. So not a lot to say about this game. Meziljie had a pretty rough opening hand, didn't get a turn 2 or 3 play, which is massive in any game of Duelist, but having those 2/3s, out of range of Egg-Morph, all that kind of thing, even though they were too early, basically left Magma with no answers, and he's going to need to draw a Plasma Storm to have any chance at all. Egg-Morph is a good bet. You need to play to your outs, to that, Plasma Storm, and that's what he's doing. There's no point playing small minions that will just get traded into. He needs to remove threats, and if he can somehow clear this board, he will be up on cards, because Grinch hasn't been conserving his cards whatsoever. And we will see the Mist Dragon. So this player is playing very fast. This is on real time, which is thankfully a new feature of the game. But, you know, not a lot to be made. Grinch is really snowballing pretty hard in this one. Now all the health is buffed. Basically it's Plasma Storm or bust. It already pretty much was. Now, you know, Spirit Harvester isn't going to do anything. Mechantors aren't going to do anything. And as we can see, he encloses the general. Lots and lots of damage facing next turn. This one is looking pretty over unless he can draw Plasma Storm off the replace. Alright, so he has one chance at it. Does he get it? No, he gets a Metamorphosis. Which might be able to keep him alive. There's 5 damage here. 7. 5. Another 5. 12. He is alive on board. But, you know, this one's basically over. So, he goes to the Earth Sphere, blocks a similar amount of damage. And yes, I don't believe that Metamorphosis would leave him dead, but I don't think this does either. So I think that's perfectly fine. This way they block each other, so it actually blocks just as much damage because now that they're 2 5s, they can't all, you know, trade in, which is perfectly fine. Still no Plasma Storm on the end of turn draw, so this one looks like it will be over very, very shortly. We will see. He'll just trade in. And just, this was definitely the nail in the coffin. The Albeast Sage, it even will live through the Plasma Storm. And just, you know, an interesting concept. We haven't seen a lot of this card, Prismatic Illusionist. But, you know, Grinch is trying it out. He's trying new decks. All these Arcanist cards got a lot better with the introduction of Bloodborne spells. We've seen a lot more play, just because having that free spell every, you know, second turn or 1 turn late game is very, very strong. It abuses the synergy. Whereas Vath, we've seen the very slow controlling list hasn't changed much after the inclusion of Bloodborne spells. What I personally like about Vath's Bloodborne spells is it allows you to be a lot more controlling. Before the introduction of them, we saw players like Dresbo, very famous for his Magma. He would be playing lots and lots of late game legendaries, trying to flash them out. Exune, Exune I think it is. Silphar Elders, you know, Pandoras, all this kind of stuff. Tons and tons of late game legendaries, and what that means is that's less cards you're dedicating to your early game win condition. Now, the Vath Bloodborne spell can actually act as sort of as a win condition yourself. You have late game inevitability, which means that you are going to win in the late game if the game goes long enough, you know, assuming things can stay equal. So there comes the Plasma Storm, but because of the Killing Edge, 6/8 will live, and Meziljie will die. So, not a lot to say about that one, as I said, but wasn't a, you know, an interesting show of just how fast these Arcanist decks can snowball if things go their way. Alright, so I will update the text scores. Okay, so that is the Vath with a win, and he will no longer have to play the Vath, which I think he's definitely going to be feeling pretty good about. You know, Vath can be very strong, but with a lack of early game, it can be weak to aggro, so it's nice to get that out of the way, as I will prepare the next game for us. Do have to bear with me, guys. The official spectator system hasn't been in place. I can't view both hands at once, but I think it's definitely something we need to do. Alright, we'll just get that up. We unfortunately do have to skip over the mulligan phase. Often there's not too much of a decision. If there's anything interesting I see, I will point it out. Okay, so it looks like Meziljie is trying out some kind of liner range deck, which is a bit interesting. Not something you see a lot, but I think the concept does make, you know, sense, in theory at least. Just being able to place those big provokes and then protect those range minions can be really good. Okay, so that's one half of it sorted. We will get the other one going. Nearly done, guys. just loading in now. Just quickly waiting for mulligans to be over. Alright, to go. Alright, off we go. So as we can see, this interesting ranged concept idea with Lionar, using that arrow whistler, which will give +1 to all minions with ranged on your side of the field. And we can see Grinch is playing a very slow Casivia controlling deck, aiming to use this Bloodborne spell, deal 1 damage to a minion, make sure it dies that turn, and then build up a bunch of Shadow Creep and inevitably win with Shadow Nova. Now, Lionar does have tools to deal with late game Shadow Novas with Sunbloom, which can counter it for 2 mana, but I think still inevitably in the late game Casivia will win if it can stay even on cards and value, just because that damage is always going to be there, plus we see late game threats already in the hand. So a very, very strong start here for Meziljie, able to go 2 mana into 2/3, very, very strong play, and when 2 of those 2 drops are Jaxi on your opening turns, that is very, very strong. Now obviously these Jaxis will be a little bit weaker because they are quite weak to Casivia's Bloodborne spell. Unfortunately for her, can't really use it this turn, and this Blood Tier Alchemist, you can take out 1, but the Shadow Reflection isn't really doing much on this turn. Interesting choice. I guess he just wanted more finishes, or maybe the ability to go a bit more aggressive in some certain matchups. So he does have a few options here. He can either come down, he could even consider Shadow Reflection just to deny a card draw. I think that's probably a little bit too clever. Something like, just attacking Bloodborne spell on, attacking Blood Tier Alchemist on this, or maybe attacking the Jaxi and Blood Tier Alchemist. Definitely using the Blood Tier Alchemist this turn. Just trying to catch up on tempo or maintain. So it looks like he might go for that. Really wants to stay ahead on board, which I actually can quite understand. And interesting. Okay. If he plays Blood Tier Alchemist, that means he's not going for the Jaxi, which it looks like he won't be. Okay, so he just wants to deny that draw, and he's going aggressive with the Shadow Reflection. Very interesting. Now, this looks like a more aggressive Shadow Creep. Maybe the idea of the deck is, have a few Shadow Creep out, kill them on turn 7 with Shadow Nova. And Casivia definitely needs that chip damage. Very rarely are you going to be able to do a whole 25 damage with Shadow Creep. So interesting. He's not really using any other mana, so I can understand that play. I personally am a more controlling style player. I probably would have gone with a more board clear option. That way you only have 1 mini Jax to deal with next turn, which means you can just Bloodborne spell it. This way, if both mini Jaxes died this turn, which they won't because of the position of the Jaxi, which is very clever by Grinch, but if they did, then it'll be a lot harder for him to deal with. So the Bloodborne spell does come online now. It's turn 5. The Arrow Whistler is definitely a problem, but we can deal with the only ranged minion. That Grasp of Agony is basically completely useless, but he will use his ability, getting that second Shadow Creep on the board. Already that Shadow Creep is, Shadow Nova is looking to do 6 damage, which is pretty significant. Will kill most of the stuff that Meziljie can play, but as you can see, those 2 Elix Stormblades in hand do survive a Shadow Nova at this point. If he can get 1 more down, then he will be able to kill it. But at the moment, that 7 health is looking very, very strong. Very nice positioning. Moving the Arrow Whistler first to make sure the mini Jax doesn't spawn closer. And you definitely want to spread out with these ranged decks. If he doesn't have the Bloodborne spell, he has to be a lot closer to this mini Jax. And now it's going to get a free 2 damage in. So we can see a very strong setup from this ranged Lionar deck. Not something we see a lot, but Abyssian is one of the worst factions for dealing with ranged creatures. They don't have a lot of range removal, just Dark Transformation, and maybe teleporting it closer with Demonic Lure, but nothing to really kill it, and nothing that you'd expect them to be running. Okay, so he does have the Dispel for the Vorpal Reaver. Now, obviously, you might want to save that for Shadow Nova, but that Vorpal Reaver is a massive threat, and you can't really let that just go undispelled. So he can kill this 6/6 for free here. It will be interesting to see if he does. I imagine he will. Okay, really valuing the card draw over, you know, the 3 damage here. He could have just put in Sojourner and the Arrow Whistler, but then he would only be drawing 1 card from his Sojourner. This will allow him to probably get 2 cards from it. Now, it's an interesting decision because he's definitely ahead on board. He can definitely tempo out his opponent, but we can see now he's got 5 cards in hand to the 4 cards of his opponent with a massive board. Not only is he out-tempoing, he's out-valuing. So there's no need to risk ever losing a value game, you know, when you can just do tempo and value. And I really like that. 3 damage is not really too important when you're trying to overwhelm your opponent with these ranged threats. Also important to note, Meziljie playing really well. Meziljie playing really well around a Shadow Nova. No 2 units next to each other. So we'll see his hand. He has running Serial, which is a ranged unit, which will bring a minion damage by in front. Now, interesting decision. The ability isn't overwhelmingly good, but it can even be used as like a Persuado Repulsor Beast if you're finishing off a game. And you know, you might want to bring it into some, you know, big taunts or into your general space, which Lionaro is pretty good at doing. So out comes the Holy Immolation, able to deal with the threats while continuing to develop his own. And we will see him taking a lot of damage. Okay, so this one is looking pretty dire. No answer to both Arrow Whistlers. He will be able to Shadow Nova here, but that's basically it. He can barely stay alive, but it's definitely looking pretty dire, and he's nowhere really close to killing his opponent. If he was able to Shadow Nova this turn, he would have a 7 damage Shadow Nova set up. If he drew another one, there'd be 11, so there's basically no way he can kill his opponent in 2 turns. So he's basically looking for a miracle way to stabilize the game within the next few turns. If he did have 9 mana, he would be able to Demonic Law this and then play the Shadow Nova, which would actually give him a pretty nice chance. Here he's still looking pretty low. We do see the Serial, choosing not to play those Elixir Stormblades. Interesting decision. I guess he just wants to get his opponent as low as possible, and basically make this threaten the lethal. I do actually like this a little bit more. Basically, if he plays Elixir, then, you know, 2 single target removals, and, you know, maybe his opponent is back in it. He's at 7 health. He has a lot of Shadow Creep going. This way, it puts him at 1. He has to answer threats every turn, which will never allow him to, further his own game plan. Say he'd only play the 1 threat. Suddenly, you Demonic Law onto the Shadow Creep. You play your Valkyrie. You're ahead on board. You have 7 health. You're not going to get bursted down by a Lionaro most likely. And you have a lot of Shadow Creep on board. So definitely a strong line by Meziljie. As you can see, they are playing very, very fast. But the Elixir Stormblade will come down, allowing him to move the extra space for the win. So a first win for Meziljie. I do realise I put the win down for Vath last game, so I will fix that up. We will just quickly fix up the scores. So that will bring it to 1-1. As Reaver was the one who got the correct win. And let's just get that going. Vath did not pick up a win. I do apologize for that. It was the Argent range deck. So as you can see, both players trying out some interesting decks. And it's a really interesting concept. We didn't really see a lot of provokes. We saw the Elixir Stormblade, probably running Ironcliff Guardian, though I haven't seen the full deck list, so I can't say for sure. But having those threats where they can be protected heaps, you're going to keep getting value while you provoke minions to defend them, is really, really strong in theory. What that fails to is when decks are able to deal with these rain units from a distance. But there's not a lot of decks that are particularly good at doing it at this point, and that Arrow Whistler is at a really nice sweet spot where it is at full health. So stuff like Phoenix Fire makes it quite hard to, it can't easily be dealt with. Xerix is really good at dealing, 2 damage, maybe 3 damage with Saberspine Tiger, that kind of thing, but can't really deal 4 damage very effectively. Definitely a sweet spot in the meta. And the ability to play Jaxi very effectively in the deck, I think it's something that's always been pretty good, just because of how it's the best proactive 2-drop in the game. And if you start off with a few of those, it's very, very strong. As we saw, he was able to snowball against Abyssin, and just having multiple range threats means that, the limited single target removal that Abyssin has is just going to be completely overwhelmed. Alright, nearly ready for game 2 here, guys. Just loading in now. Okay, so it looks like we have the Vitruvian mirror matchup. Now, quite interesting here because we have Grinch on Sarge, and we have Meziljie with a more standard Xerix list. Let me just quickly update the score, and we will be into the swing of things. Alright, so we can see that even though Sarge has been played, Grinch is still going quite aggressive. Now, obviously, this is probably not a this probably is a suboptimal deck. It's not an optimal deck, but we can see a very aggressive hand, looking like an aggro vet that you see on the ladder. Now, Meziljie often opens with a really, really strong start in this matchup, and I think these Obelisks are very, very good in matchups that are very aggressive, because unless your opponent has a Dispel, they have to spend 6 damage in an aggro deck dealing with this, and not only will that, it will continue to generate value and deal with threats for you. Okay, so a pretty decent start here. 6/4 Dialytus is able to challenge quite effectively on this Obelisk, but getting that 3/2 is already enough, and we will see the buff to kill Dialytus, I imagine. No Dispel, so that 0/10 provoke will live. But against an aggro deck, you don't really care too much about the 0/10 provoke. If it can be buffed by something by Second Wish, it can become seriously annoying. But definitely not a problem for the immediate time being. Now, as we can see, Meziljie very careful not to move into that range of that 3/1 Flameblood Warlock if he doesn't have to. Just because you're versing an aggressive deck, never let your opponent get more damage than they need to. Just making sure he stays outside of the general. And I think just the hand composition and possibly the deck composition, we don't know enough about Meziljie's list, automatically tells us that Grinch will be the aggressor. Flameblood Warlocks, Second Wish is Repulsor Beast, whereas, Meziljie is able to play the value game. He has card draw, he has Obelisk, and he can continue to generate value. So he's able to deal with the Obelisk, which is definitely pretty big. But I think the Second Wish, or the First Wish might come down onto the Sojourner. Okay, interesting. He chooses to go with the Primus Fist. Interesting decision there. I think it's probably because of how efficient the Sojourner trade is here. Or he may choose just to use his Bloodborne spell. We'll see. He does have the Dunecaster in hand, so he may want to use that this turn. Lots of buff cards. A very strong opening from both players, I would say, but definitely favour Meziljie. Okay, so there comes that Second Wish. And I did, forget about the provoke, stopping them from moving. But yeah, efficient use here. He could have possibly chose to play very passive and just ran away and let the Sojourner deal with it. But I don't think that's necessary at all. You're still at 19 health, and your opponent doesn't have much of a board going on. So this is looking like a very, very strong start for Meziljie. Grinch can deal with one of these sets with the Second Wish, not with a Second Wish, sorry, with a Repulsor Beast. But the other one is pretty impossible to deal with, unless, well, he does actually have a pretty decent clear here. He can Repulsor Beast, then chuck in the Saber. Oh no, he can't chuck in the Saber Sign because he's only at 5 mana still. So yes, definitely a little bit of a problem. It looks like he will repulse the beast and then try to ignore the problem of the 4-5. His general can run away, let it get provoked for a turn. I'm not really sure about the positioning of this. I guess he just wants to develop a board and doesn't want his opponent to kill the 2-2 for free, which does make sense with the second wish in hand. But also unlikely that Meziljie will let him get hit with a 2-2 next turn. He does have that dominate will in hand though, so he's going to continue to keep playing late game. Whereas, you know, Meziljie is starting to run low on threats. He has lots of 2-mana cards, which will do fine, as he still has 5 in hand. But if this game can go late game, that's where Grinch, you know, has potential to come back, because he has the dominate will. But of course, he needs a good target to dominate will, something like an Amaya healer. Okay, so we will see that Meziljie continues to drop threats, further his board advantage with that Sojourner, and it was also going to keep up in cards. Yep, he looks like he thought about putting the obelisk here, but I definitely agree with this positioning. He needs to keep it out of, you know, range of a free hit of this, because this psionic strike can start to come into play. Sarge can quite easily deal 4 damage to that, and with another hit, he can deal this. He can still do it because of the Primus Fist here, but no reason to give your opponent more options than they need to. I don't fault Meziljie for playing the obelisk, even though it will die, just because, you know, you're reversing an aggro deck. You're still making them use up damage that they could use otherwise, and you want this, you know, Sojourner to live and possibly get more value. Now we will see that Grinch is able to clear the Sojourner if he wants to, which he will. Now it looks like Grinch is starting to go on the idea that he can win this game in the late game. He can keep clearing those minions. Sarge Hero Power is decently strong. I don't think he's running artifacts, so it's basically just a 4 damage hit with the general. But that dominate will definitely changes the way that he can play this game. If his opponent drops an Amaya healer and he can steal that, that is absolutely massive. But there's also this time bomb of this Sojourner, 3/7 with the second wish, that unless he has a dispel, that's definitely not going to be easy to deal with. He maybe has one more turn of it being irrelevant if he positions correctly. But after that, it's definitely going to be back into play, and it's not something he ideally wants to dominate will. So we will see how he aims to deal with that one. Okay, as we can see, Meziljie just trying to clear the board as much as he can, and developing his own board with these obelisks. So just further developing a board. I like this, just blocking off a you know, a general hit. There's no reason to even risk your opponent, you know, getting out of control. We do see a Hexblade, which could be nice in theory, but of course Rashar's Curse does exist as a card, which will basically kill it, you know, very cheaply and still give him a 2/2 Dervish. So that's definitely bad news. I do think that he has to play it though. He has to risk the chance that his opponent doesn't have a Rashar's Curse. This late into the game, it's definitely possible that his opponent does replace it, just because it's low impact as a card. But versing Sarge, it's definitely a little bit risky. And now he's had to put himself in range of that Sojourner in order to get value off this Hexblade, which once Rashar's Curse happens is going to be pretty bad news for him. But he has to play his cards. He's way too far behind on board. He doesn't have options and nothing good to dominate will. I don't think we can fault Grinch for that play at all. Okay, so we will most likely see a Rashar's. It doesn't really matter what order this happens in because of that second wish. He's not going to take any damage from that Hexblade, and he's not going to get the effect because it only deals the effect on damage, not when attacked. So I imagine we'll see Rashar's here. Actually quite a lot of damage out of Meziljie. He has double Rashar's, which is 6, and then 4 more from the June casters. That's 10, 13, 17. I think he might just be dead here. So we can see a very, very strong start. These obelisks are very, very good when they don't get dispelled, especially in an aggro matchup. If your opponent can deal with them, it probably means they've used a ton of resources dealing with them. And if you don't deal with them, they're basically going to kill all your minions for free every turn. So as we saw, Grinch tried to play late game, but it kind of conflicted with his early game plays. Now, I don't think there's anything he could have done about this. Okay, I don't know if I miscounted or he's just choosing. I think he might just be BMing a little bit because he basically knows he can't lose this. But as I was saying, we saw that Grinch was forced to go by tempo plays. He has to play that Repulsive Beast to survive. But then if he has to switch over to a late game plan with Dominate Wills, with Hexblade, with that Bloodborne spell, then suddenly, you know, he's got this ticking time bomb with Sojourner coming back into play, which basically will ruin the value game plan. Because Meziljie didn't drop a big threat that he could dominate Will and run away with the game with, it basically meant that he was playing two conflicting game plans and he was never able to get back onto the board. If you're playing cards like Repulsive Beast, you really need to be getting ahead on the board and closing the game out soon. Which is interesting why he's running Dominate Will in the same deck, but I think Repulsive Beast is really necessary in Vitruvian. They really lack good single target answers at the moment. A lot aren't even running many dispels, if any. So it's definitely something that a necessary evil, I would say. We'll update the scores. So Meziljie goes up 2-1. And only has his Varth deck left to win with. Against Sarge and Cassiva, it's definitely potential for Grinch to come back. If he gets a strong early game, Varth can definitely have struggle dealing with it, which we saw in Game 1. But definitely an uphill battle. He has to win 2 games against 1. And I will just quickly load up now that the scores are updated. We will get into our 4th game of our best of 5 series. So once again, really just want to thank these two guys. They went out of their way to play a game because I wanted to get some casting experience. And it's something I really enjoy doing. Obviously, I'll probably get better at the production side of things as we go on. So guys, just have to bear with me here. There we go. So yes, if there are any people involved in the tournament scene and you're looking for more casters, it's definitely something I want to get involved with. I'm going to be practicing a lot of my own time. Hopefully, bringing you guys more content. Games from really strong players because. They like to play, they like to have their game shown off, and I like to watch them. So, also, if you want to send in some of your own games, you have a really close series, maybe you play in a tournament that doesn't get casted, that's perfectly fine. I'll probably take a look at it. Okay. I believe I've got the right games going on. Nearly ready. Just loading in. So it will be Varth versus Cassiva. Now, I think this is one of the better matchups for Cassiva. Probably better than that side. Just because Magma can be quite slow. And if the deck is playing quite slow, then late game Shadow Novas will just continue to build up and build up. And if the Varth can't pressure enough early, suddenly you're going to get Shadow Nova to death. And a lack of good AoE dispel can be a problem. So Meziljie will definitely have to be on the attack here. He'll have to try and pressure his opponent. And we do see a pretty controlling hand from Grinch here. Okay, so at least Meziljie had a little bit more luck with a turn 1 play. A couple of 4-drops in hand. Mercantor can be pretty good here. So he does have some tools to pressure, but it will be interesting to see how much Grinch is able to survive and remove his opponent's threats, starting with this Blood Tier Alchemist, just denying that mana tile. Nothing else to play here. So he chooses not to attack. This is basically signifying that he really wants to be able to ramp in future turns. I don't mind the attack there just because getting a bit of chip damage and also having 2 targets for the general to hit at one time is normally pretty strong. Okay, so we will see. So Grinch does have access to up to, you know, probably just 5 mana this turn. You can play Sojourner at plus Demonic Lure. He can even play both of his sets actually if he wants to. We will see. Really tempo out. Interesting decision. Very interesting. So he chooses not to teleport it into a corner. Okay, so he wants to clear the minion. Now it will be a bit of an awkward trade for the Primus Fist. He will have to, you know, die to his big brother. But just developing that Shadow Creep. All he wants to be doing is, you know, every time that Bloodborne spell is up, he wants to be developing it, and then late game that Shadow Nova is going to hit for a ton of damage. Now we do see another late game Bloodborne spell here from Meziljie, making sure to use that as well, building up a threat, and playing another 4-drop, so nice and on curve. And I also kind of like this positioning. I don't think he wants his general to be hit by the Sojourner, just because, you know, it's easier, it takes less damage. This way, he has to trade awkwardly into the Veteran Silver. Even with this Spectral Blade that we do see, he won't be able to clear the egg. And definitely nice to get this Veteran Silver out on a turn where the Bloodborne spell is not available. He will duel with the Sojourner anyway. It will still, you know, probably gain 2 cards, depending on what Meziljie plays next turn. This turn, it is looking probably just like a Reaper of the Nine Moons. It is a tiny bit slow. It does take a turn to really do much. Oh, interesting. He's considering the Primus Shieldmaster here. I do think he will end up going with the Reaper of the Nine Moons, though. It's more mana efficient. He wants to play on curve, and it can be a little bit slow. The Provoke is an instant stat effect. It will affect the board the turn that it comes down. So I definitely like this, and you know, there's chances you can get some big minions out of Magmar. Siltha Elders, Mechantors, Spirit Harvesters, all can be pretty useful in surviving. We can see Meziljie has the possibility to put him down to 10, plus another 6, so he will be at 6 health at the end of this turn with a clear board, and only the Siltha Elder, so not really going to help Grinch survive too much. So we've seen that Cassidia is having a problem it often has, where it just gets run over early game. Now, even though, you know, Meziljie didn't have the most explosive start, just a simple 2-drop into double 4-drop plus the Hero Bow is just so much pressure, and it looks really, really hard for Grinch to survive here. He does have that Primus Shieldmaster, which could possibly buy him a little bit of time, but there is an Egg Morph in the hand of Meziljie, so we will see how he plays it. Alright, so thankfully for him, the egg stops him being dead, just a simple Egg Morph. But as we can see, the Egg Morph plus Blood Tear Alchemist will be the end of the game here. There was another option here. He could have blocked off with the Primus Shieldmaster. It would allow his opponent's general to hit him for free, but it would stop him from dying to this Blood Tear Egg Morph play, just by having the 2 eggs block. But I don't think that's a winning play, and I don't blame Grinch for going for a play that could possibly let him win the game, because he needs to preserve his health. I don't think there's any health gain in the deck, so he needs to preserve that 6 health. He's never going to win if he ends on 3 health when he's that far away from killing his opponent. So that will be a quick end to the series, 3-1. Both players played extremely fast. Some new decks. It's sure, you know, sometimes we want to watch all these tier 1 decks, but it's also nice to watch really good players playing well, playing fast, and playing these new decks. Liner Ranged is possibly, you know, I don't want to say a high tier deck, but it could be, you know, a tier 3 deck at some point in time, maybe even to tier 2. But it's nice to just see these ideas, see these concepts. We saw Cassidia. Cassidia is a deck that I think people have kind of overrated in the past. I have said this. I don't think that it's good enough at controlling. Sure, it has a good late game with that Bloodborne spell, but you really need to be able to control the board extremely well, and it can snowball, but if you're playing Cassidia, you need to go aggressive, 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 and it's something I really like playing against, just because I can go aggressive, I can pressure as much as I want. They don't have a lot of removal. If you don't give them turns to set up, then that Bloodborne spell isn't too effective. So anyway, that will be the 3-1 for Meziljie. I hope you guys enjoy this kind of video. I'll definitely plan on doing some more in the past. If you have any feedback, that is definitely greatly appreciated. I'm still playing around with OBS, audio settings, all that kind of thing, but any advice is definitely welcome. If there's any type of content you want to see, if you want to send your own replays, that is all very nice and good. And next time, I'll see you.